I'm the chair. There you go. So my name is John Allen. I'm the chair of the U.S. Biosphere Network, and been working with a number of the biospheres, and certainly with the steering committee, and then working with our really capable interns. Um, I, I I've worked with interns my whole career. I mean, I know many of you have too, and find it a spectacular learning experience for me personally. I learn probably more than sometimes our interns learn, but I think it's been a great partnership over the years. Um, and what an incredible opportunity for our biospheres to really think about how they want to utilize and work with interns going forward. Uh, we'll hear a little bit about the intern experiences today and a couple of the different biospheres. But my long-term goal, quite frankly, not so long-term goal, would be for all of our biospheres to be able to really have a relationship with a school, a university, a college, a tribal college, and really utilize the intern and the intern experience. It's paid and non-paid interns. We generally like paid internships better. It's better for the students, clearly. Not a big fan of unpaid internships, and that always comes with some financial obligations and constraints. But clearly, working with academic institutions and interns is one option that I think many of our biospheres can really consider and think about. So that's my paid political advertisement for interns. I'm a big fan. My first intern ever when I worked in a corporation is now the CEO of the corporation. So either I did well or my career stalled. One, I'm trying to decide which one is which, but he went on to build a really important career, and I look back on the interns that I've worked with over my career and find them to be some of the greatest experiences of my career in all sorts of settings. So if you've not worked with interns before, they are wonderful, they are insightful, they can push you, they can challenge you, and they can expand horizons in ways that it's really hard to imagine. So with that, I'm going to just make a quick introduction. The two of them can tell you a little bit more about each one. I'm not going to go through their whole bios, but so we have two of the interns coming to us. Manar Talab comes from Obtawaing Biosphere Reserve. She joined us how many months ago now?
Um, well, now like 9 months, but the internship was 8 months.
8 months, right? And she's moved into a coordinator position, as we all hope to do, certainly within our spheres as much as humanly possible. And we'll talk about her experiences in working with the Obtawaing Biosphere Reserve. And Emma Rossino, I keep hearing phenomenal things about Emma and her work within the Mojave and Colorado Desert Biosphere region. Spent a little bit of time again with them yesterday on a planning call, and they're also, I see Allie's clapping as they should. These are really two spectacular individuals that have done tremendous service for their organizations. And with that, I'll just turn that over to you, Emma and Manar, and you can kind of lead us over the next bit of time here. But thank you for doing this. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your commitment to the biosphere concept. We really value it tremendously.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, John's been a huge support just through this whole internship, even though we work closely at times and then not. But yeah, John is great. I will share my screen so we can get into it. So good morning. Thank you everybody for joining us. And if you're in some place that's been hit by the cold front, I hope you're staying really warm and properly defrosting your car. We hope that this webinar, which will explore our individual experiences and our collective reflections on the internship experience, will be informative to you all and start some conversations about youth engagement in the biosphere regions. To introduce myself, I mean, John did a great job already, but I'm a Metro Detroit native, Michigan native. So I began working for the Biosphere region shortly before and since I graduated university with a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology. So this has been a great first job out of college. And my internship lasted 8 months and ended in December. But as John said, I've been able to extend my time with the Biosphere region as a partnership coordinator. So that's been a great thing that's come from this internship, which we'll get to later. And I'll let Emma take it away with her introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Minar. Yeah, I'm Emma. I'm originally from Vermont, from the Champlain Adirondack Biosphere Network, but I'm, for the last 6 months or so, served as the coordinator for the Mojave and Colorado Deserts Biosphere region and kind of the whole desert area of Southeast California. Yeah, I also graduated in May with a degree in environmental science, and this is also my first like big girl job out of college. So I started in June. I was based in Death Valley National Park and through the Scientists in Parks program, and then that term was up in December. So yeah, when I talked about, we'll each talk just about our individual internship, some of the work we did, kind of the context of our individual biosphere regions, and kind of the experiences we had overall. And then reflect, we found we had a lot of like similarities in our experiences, even though we're in, I was kind of through a government agency and Minar was more in the academia / NGO world. And we were in obviously very different biosphere regions with very different ecologies. We had a lot of similarities in our internship experience. So we'll talk about that a little bit, talk about some things that we thought went really well and were big strengths of the program and some suggestions for improvement. And then we have some discussion questions that we'll give to kind of just get some of your thoughts and kind of get those conversations going, and then wrap up with some Q&A.
So yeah, we'll just begin with a discussion of our time with our respective biospheres, our projects, our experiences, and then ultimately our reflections. So this is just to give everyone a visual of, you know, where me and Emma are sitting, and then also just that we are 2 of a handful of interns of the 28 biosphere regions. So we think this program has a huge potential to expand and should. So just kind of giving that picture. And then I've introduced myself already, but I was hired to Obtawaing Biosphere Region in the capacity as a climate solutions intern. So working with climate change adaptation and building the foundation of OBR beyond the strategic work plan that they had developed in a variety of workshops with people in the biosphere region. So I kind of came on after that work had happened and to kind of get the ball rolling. And then also you can grab my email if anyone wants to reach out or comment or anything like that. So as a part of this kind of building out the foundation, I had quite a few projects. These are just a handful of things that I kind of did in my time as climate solutions intern. So my first and ultimately the project that stayed with me the longest is a huge resource database of climate change adaptation tools. There's kind of a screenshot of that spreadsheet here. It's color coded. It has a million different tabs. I've since had to create documents to help people navigate the monster that I've created. So that has definitely been just like a really expansive project, just bringing in so many different resources, forecasting tools, guidebooks on climate change adaptation for, you know, environmental organizations, for city planning, for just about anything you can think of. Also, I kind of research and synthesize case studies to serve as positive and negative examples of, you know, regional conservation and sustainable development to kind of inform the work that we do at OBR and hope to do. So that was another big project of mine, doing the case studies. And then I also worked with our Coastal Resilience Initiative on compiling reference data sets and regional data sets to help with the project that will eventually build data products to help with coastal resilience projects in our region. So that was something I worked on. Now it's called
Oh, thank you.
towards the end. And then getting to the end of my internship, I worked more on communications. And sorry, could someone please mute their Zoom? I'm not sure who it is, but yeah. So towards the end of my internship, there was a lot more what's called communications focused and public facing things. So I created a website for the region to serve as a centralized location for steering committee members, who they are, their contact information, just what we've been doing in OBR. And then I also wrote out some climate literacy and ecosystem and interest articles for kind of public awareness. And then also created documents on climate vulnerability and coastal vulnerability in our region for the use of our steering committee members and other organizations in our region. And then aside from the projects that I did sitting in front of a computer for a few months, the experiences that I had with OBR were really what shaped and really characterized my entire position. I only live up north in the U of M biostation for a couple months in Pellston, but those were definitely the best parts of my internship. Just being able to be in the landscape, especially, I mean, me and Emma have this in common. We're both not from the biospheres that we're working for. I'm a bit closer because I'm a Metro Detroit native, but I'd never been that far north in Michigan in my life. I kind of just went up to Tawas Bay, and that was as far as I'd gone. So going all the way to the tip of the Met was a whole new experience and a whole new world. So that kind of helped me build my connection to the biosphere and frankly, my commitment to the kind of mission of the Biosphere region. So kind of attending different conferences, meeting professionals in the Biosphere region, environmental professionals who are committed to the mission, meeting people and communities in the area, just the people who live there, and looking at who would be benefiting from the work that I was doing really kind of cemented my interest and my kind of motivation to do that work. So that was definitely doing those presentations, meeting people, being a part of these conferences was kind of the most immersive and rewarding parts of my experience. And I got all of these beautiful pictures and got to be in all of these beautiful places. So that was just very rewarding. And then finally, kind of looking back at 8 months of my life, I kind of was thinking about just material benefits or tangible things. So obviously, to my great fortune, I've been able to continue my employment and my time with the Obtawaing Biosphere region, at least temporarily as their partnership coordinator. So kind of being able to continue and build on the work that I've been doing. And then also just being exposed to this whole new world of the USBN, the Man in Biosphere program, the World Network. I mean, I visited Lebanon this past summer, and I kind of got to explore some of the biosphere reserves up there and kind of take a real nice hike. So that kind of just opened my world up a little bit more because I'd never heard of a biosphere before getting this job. So that just kind of awareness is have opened my perspective up a lot and allowed me to meet a lot of really great people. And then kind of reflecting on that, it was the in-person experiences and the physical kind of element that really was invaluable to my sense of connection to the biosphere network, and my investment in its future. So most of my internship has been remote, and I definitely think that going forward, or if they kind of bring another intern in, if they could try to make the in-person part of the experience even longer, or maybe for the whole internship, that would just create so much more of a positive impact or just a sense of immersion. Because Zoom screens can get everybody down. And just being in the biosphere really makes a difference. And then also reflecting on what my position has meant for my biosphere region is having a full-time employee that was dedicated to the work of the biosphere, and that alone greatly expanded the capacity of my biosphere. And I was able to create so much just from my energy, and then the ideas of the steering committee members who maybe didn't have time to do these projects with their full-time jobs. They were able to kind of pass that responsibility on to me. And since I was there to do it, I was able to create so much just from their kind of ideas and suggestions. So it lets a great strides towards the mission of the Biosphere region, and also benefited me professionally. So I think it was a net positive for me and the Biosphere region I was working for. Now Emma can kind of reflect on her part.
Really, thanks. Yeah, so again, I'm a Rosa now. I was a scientist and parks intern at Death Valley National Park, serving as coordinator for the Mojave and Colorado Deserts Biosphere region. And so it's kind of some of the backgrounds on the Mojave and Colorado Deserts Biosphere region it's founded in 1984. Did a few things and then did go through the periodic review process with a lot of work, obviously, as you all know, from people all throughout the region, and got that approval in 2017. But since then, there's a kind of a core group of especially National Park Service staff who are kind of have an interest in the project, have been trying to get it going, and have been really involved. And so that was who I was mainly working with when I first got to the Biosphere region, especially, and with the goal of kind of taking this thing was like we have our name officially, we have all this potential and a lot of interest in it, and kind of moving that towards the direction of having a steering committee established, having some more solid direction and increasing awareness too. So that was kind of the scope of my work with the Biosphere region. So if you want to go to the next one. So that looked like doing a lot of like programmatic support. So a lot of just the, setting up meetings, emails, that kind of thing. I also did update the Biosphere region maps and spatial data, especially because I have more of a GIS background, and there had been some border changes of our core areas with the Dingle Act of 2019. So updating that, as well as creating a spatial geodatabase, which I'll plug for if that is available, that it's all just publicly available data, but for some mapping purposes, that there's a big geodatabase of like national and state layers. If anyone's interested in it, I'll put my email in the chat and I'll send it to you. But so I did a lot of that work, kind of trying to use mapping as a tool for communication as much as I could. And I actually got to go to the Geological Society of America conference in October. I was able to get a travel grant for that and do a poster there through the Scientists and Parks program, which was really cool. Made a story map, made a fact sheet and some other communication stuff. Did a lot of like in-reach within the Park Service about the Biosphere region and outreach. So for example, went to the Desert Managers Group, which is a big group of land management agencies, including the Department of Defense, because about 13% or so of our Biosphere region is military lands, as well as a lot of NGOs and stuff, and is able to present and get somebody from the 29 Palms military base on board. I was also able to go down to Borrego Springs, which is, even though it's also within the Biosphere region, is about a 6-hour drive from Death Valley National Park. Just how big things are out here. And it's hosted by the UC Irvine Desert Research Center, and did some community presentations with a lot of NGOs and California state parks down there. And then that all kind of accumulated in a workshop in November that was as many people as we could rustle up to kind of have this full day, mostly in-person workshop at Mojave National Preserve, towards the direction of establishing a steering committee, seeing where potential partners would want to take this. And I do know that there's the first meeting since my departure, since my term was up was yesterday. So I'm really excited to hear how that went. But yeah, that was kind of most of the work I did. And then if you want to go to the next one, of course, the experiences were a big part of the internship as well. So being based in Death Valley National Park was huge. I think that, as I would definitely agree with Minar, that the in-person aspect of it is so important, especially for something like Biosphere Regions, where it's so based on that sense of place and that connection to place and to relationships within and about that space. And so even though most of the work I was doing was at the computer or remote over Teams, or every once in a while doing some traveling and doing stuff in person, being physically in Death Valley National Park, being in the Mojave Desert, and having access to that park staff community was a huge part of my internship. And I also got to do some other stuff, some like field work with Park Service people, got to kind of see their day-to-day. I was also there during Hurricane Hillary in August, and was able to be the GIS specialist on the incident command team until they got like a real adult. But that was a really, really cool experience to see that kind of how that disaster management happens, and be there as part of the, pretty much everybody was evacuated, park was closed, and see that whole side of things. That was a really cool experience as well. So if you want to go to the next one. And yeah, so this, for me and my like personal life, it did definitely lead to my current employment being in Death Valley National Park, and working with other park staff, especially during Hurricane Hillary. I ended up I'm now, my leaf logo, a Student Conservation Association project leader for a crew that is going to do flood damage assessments on all the unpaved roads in the park, which is over 1,000 miles, and doing some backcountry inventorying stuff. So they're wilderness first aid training right now, but if people come barging in, they probably forgot something. But so that was something that happened, like, because they knew I had already lived in the park, and they knew that, I have this great connection to place, and that was something I really wanted to stay in this landscape, and stay doing the similar kind of work. And I think that for me, the kind of natural disaster angle of it too, and the way that is related to both the environmental and natural science side of things and the social side of things, is like very much in the spirit of Biosphere Regions, and has been a really cool thing to dive deeper into. This internship was really, really great professional experience for me. I think it really pushed myself, got to do experience in areas that I just like hadn't lived in very much before, like a lot of that communication stuff and outreach, and was just huge in like building my professional skills and abilities, and was also just like a great way, especially working from within a government agency, to kind of get a perspective on how these things work, and how like just understanding some of the structures of how the capacity and limitations and obligations and mandates of a government agency affect like the work that you're actually able to do, and like how things happen. And I think whether I end up working in a government setting or not, having that understanding is like a huge part of the Scientists in Parks program in general, and especially at Biosphere Regions. I got to have so much more autonomy than I think most of my friends who have also graduated in May and are doing internships ever had. I was emailing like the executive directors of all these NGOs, and getting to talk to people in state government and federal government, and in tribes and in NGOs, and having that like really wide exposure to a lot of things was huge. And we'll talk more about that too later on, the kind of the like autonomy versus mentorship side of a program like this. But definitely when it comes to the Biosphere region, I think similar to Manar, like having a dedicated full-time person was really big, in terms of just like big for me, like having somebody in charge of setting up meetings every month, of sending reminder emails, nagging people over email. I just to like kind of keep that momentum going, I think was made a big difference, especially at somewhere like Mojave and Colorado deserts. That's a little bit earlier on in its kind of stage of Biosphere region life. So yeah, I think with that, we can keep going on to the overall reflections that we kind of had in common.
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to figure out how to split this up and talk about maybe strengths and challenges, but then we ended up kind of framing up as strengths and suggestions, to be a little bit more helpful. So in the sense of what worked well, I think this first one, being able to have a sense of community with the other interns and even just youth working in Biosphere. So we had our first quarterly meeting for the youth board in July 15, which has since been really great. But before that, we kind of depended on these kind of scrambled together meetings with like the other interns and the other people in the USBN. And that kind of near the beginning of Emma's internship, but a little bit further along in my internship, just really built the sense of, even though we might be the only one of our kind in our biospheres, there are so many people across the country who are kind of doing similar work. even if they're in very different landscapes. And so that sense of community was really, really important to kind of keeping our momentum and just creating, you know, some connections that we've been able to build on later. Um, Additionally, professional interactions with other organizations and communities within our biospheres have been really big. So speaking especially on, you know, in-person presentations and networking events and just being able to represent our biospheres in that capacity has really been a highlight of our internships and just the development of our skills as young professionals. And that we'll be able to kind of take beyond this internship. And then for both of us, but for me especially, these internships were also just to facilitated building some really marketable skills. So like the first thing I had to do in my internship was take a lot of ArcGIS tutorials, and someone who wants to be a future ecologist, ArcGIS is very important. So that was something that I kind of gained from this internship that'll go off beyond this and really benefit me into the future. And then me and Emma both really had a lot of communications experience, creating communications material, dealing with the email thing, and just really building that skill up and just connecting with people. Um, and then our internships were both also very self-motivated, project-based, and independent. So that kind of responsibility really forced us to grow in our capacity to do things and create, you know, products and lead different projects, since we were kind of left to our own devices occasionally, and that just made us stronger. Um, and then that what we've been talking about, that in-person integration into work community and landscapes, that in-personal element we've been hammering on throughout the presentation, but that was something that really drove home the kind of positive experience we both had. And then finally, ultimately, our internship led into further employment in our biospheres, which was really huge because we kind of spent 6 to 8 months with the biosphere. And then there was like before we got offered our next employment, it's like, okay, I guess I just learned all of this. And then now I'm going to try to find a job somewhere else and go off into the world. So being able to kind of continue building on the work that we did as interns in our current positions and just being able to get further employment from those connections we made has also just been a huge, you know, the cherry on top of these internships. And Emma can talk now about some suggestions we have for future interns.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these kind of boil down to like taking those things that worked well, like especially that sense of community, whether it's like being in person in your site, or like have the community with other interns and like other young people in Biosphere regions around the country, and taking those things and making them a little bit more standardized, or making sure that they happen. Like I know for me, I think Cliff probably connected me with Sam Couple, who many of you may know, and I was able to talk to him in like the first week of my internship or something, and he was like, oh, here's also all of these technical guidelines from UNESCO and like all these fact sheets about like what even is a biosphere region. Because I think Bernard and I had similar experiences of maybe the first few weeks being like just like trying to figure out what a biosphere region is and like what that means and what UNESCO is and all of that. And so I think, which sometimes like I think that doing your own research only gets you so far. And I think since internships tend to be pretty short term, like cutting down on that time of like figure like what even am I doing by having more of a standard packet of like, this is what biosphere regions are, this is what the USBN is, these are the important people to know, this is like what's happened in your particular biosphere region so far. I think that could help like just streamline things and make sure everybody gets off to a good start. And similarly, having like kind of a standard introduction to other interns, to people throughout the USBN could be nice. And I was talking about how she had a college job that had like everybody had access to a shared Google slide deck, and you each just put your picture and your contact info and a little bit about yourself on a slide. And that even just like seeing, oh, there's others out there like me. even if you're not talking to them all the time, is huge. And like we definitely had, Manar and I and some other people had like this summer a lot of meetings that were ostensibly like planning something, but then we would end up just like talking for an hour about like our lives and what we were doing and our work with Biosphere Regions. And that was huge, honestly, to know that other people are going through the same thing and doing the same kind of work I'm doing, even though nobody around me is doing something quite like this. So basically coming up with ways to like make that a little bit more standardized and make sure that everybody gets to have those experiences in order to help them be successful as a Biosphere Region intern. And then I think we've also both had the experience that like, especially in a Biosphere Regions that are maybe a little bit earlier on in their life cycle, that it's a pretty nebulous job, which is, I think, a good thing. I think that's overall positive because it forces you to kind of look at things big picture and take a look at how you want to approach this huge project and what things are important. And I think that's a really important skill to practice. But with that, it also like having that mentorship and supervision, especially in the beginning, a little bit goes a long way. And so I think having the expectation that that there'll be mentorship and supervisors, especially for like, for me, for example, I could have all the thoughts that I wanted about how I thought a biosphere region should be rejuvenated, but some of the just like institutional norms and like within like social norms within how a like government agency and NGOs and stuff, as just like someone fresh out of college, it's like you only really get to know that by experience. Like it's not really something you can research on the internet. And so having somebody who's gone through that before and understands the landscape is super, super important. Like I definitely leaned on Cliff McCready a lot, especially towards the end of my internship. And like that was huge to be able to like take all these thoughts I had and make them reality. Was having that mentorship. So I think just having expectation that, especially in the beginning, that's going to take a little bit of capacity to get that intern like off the ground and in the right direction where they can really be effective is important. And then on the other side, communicating to applicants, which I definitely feel like this was communicated to me. So this is more of a hypothetical, but just that this is probably going to be a pretty independent internship and requires a lot of self-motivation and self-direction. And I think going into it with that mindset can really help somebody be successful. And yeah, so I think overall we both felt that our Biosphere internships really helped us grow as professionals, and that these things are temporary. There's grants, and then the grants end. Who knows what we'll be doing in the future and whether or not we'll be like directly working with the Biosphere region. But no matter what, that knowledge and enthusiasm that we have for Biosphere regions will follow us in our careers wherever we go.
And then I kind of put this together based on some conversations I had with interns from the Georgian Bay Biosphere in Canada and the Champlain Adirondack Biosphere, who have since gone on to other things and were unable to join us on the internship on the webinar, but they kind of really left their mark. So we were talking a little bit about something we had noticed early on, is that though we had some commonalities in our work, some of the kind of baseline of what we were doing in our internship could vary really greatly. So for example, at the beginning of my internship, most of my work was based in conservation, biodiversity, climate change, and the Georgian Bay Biosphere intern, Allison, was really working directly with communities, like advertising electric vehicles or really working with local government and green infrastructure and things like that. So we were like, there's kind of a spectrum here. And we've kind of I've noticed that with each intern that I've met, that we kind of have this spectrum that we fall on of like working on biodiversity and more habitat-based work versus more societal. And obviously, the mission of the biosphere holds both of these things at once. So where I place anybody on this kind of scale is really arbitrary and based on my own experience with them, but kind of thinking that there is a bit of a balance there, and some biospheres are more concerned on one side or the other or more focused. So just thinking about how that fits into the work of the USBN and how we kind of meet each other on that, where we are, and just looking at how the interns had different experiences. So I kind of met with the community in OBR through my own exploration and going into town. But like, for example, Jasper from Cascade Head, he had weekly town halls with business owners and kind of residents of the biosphere. So those were something that were just like a huge difference in the work we were doing, though we had a relatively similar position as like the intern of the biosphere. So just thinking about, you know, like if there should be a more standard code of conduct, or if it really is just each biosphere is its own world with these different levels of development and immersion in the community. And then also thinking about all the different interns I met and just those kind of stats. So we kind of had 5 interns that we interacted with across the 28 biospheres. So it was 1 intern per biosphere. And obviously there are other youth that come into the USBN through master's projects or things like that. But when we were kind of talking to paid youth, it was pretty small of a proportion compared to to how many biospheres we have. And then each internship lasted 6 to 8 months. So when we kind of think about the fact that, you know, there is no kind of set every year there's going to be an intern for each of these biospheres, just how much impact can we really have overall when we have, you know, only 5 interns across 28 biospheres, and then each of us is working at our biosphere for less than a year. So just kind of reflecting on that and moving forward, thinking about how much of a priority it should be to keep these positions going and expand to further biospheres. So now we can kind of move into the discussion aspect, and we have a few questions for you, which Emma can read out, but just know that you can take up these questions if you want, or you can pose your own. We really just wanted to get the ball rolling. So Emma, go ahead.
Yeah, totally. I think that, yeah, great room for anybody's thoughts or questions on any kinds of these things. These are just to kind of get people thinking. I'll read them out to also give us all time to think and think about some answers. So one is, how do internships fit into the mission and goals of Biosphere Regions? And then, is it important or should it be a priority for biospheres to create more positions for youth engagement? How can internship programs be expanded to create greater capacity and benefit to individual careers and the work of Biosphere Regions? And then, what type of projects are a good fit for interns to take on and what maybe are not? But yeah, so we'll totally open it up. We'd love to hear from all of you.
Fire at will.
Is that you, Newt?
That's me.
Yeah, why don't you jump in?
Okay, I'll jump in. I really think this is a valuable discussion. Thank you both for your insights and sharing your experience. I really like the spectrum of natural sciences to social sciences, and I think we could add another dimension to that, and kind of when we think about the large constellation of interns that I hope will develop from your pioneering efforts. Another dimension perpendicular or orthogonal to that could be the arts dimension, which would have at one end the communication arts, you know, human arts, and then graphic arts, storytelling arts, cultural work. So we could basically have a 2-dimensional or 4-dimensional, I guess, view of what the spectrum is.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And even last time we gave a run of this for the youth board who had their quarterly meeting, and they were talking about another dimension that was community kind of work, because Beata, who works with the Congaree Biosphere Reserve, does a lot of work in environmental justice. And so talking about that element of it, which I think can also fit into social sciences, but can also be a world of its own.
Yeah, nice.
Because you mentioned, Manar, the youth board, and you mentioned a couple times, we have Janelle Booker on the call, and maybe Janelle can just take a quick minute. She's the chair of the Biosphere Youth Board, and maybe just introduce herself. And I know there was at least one question in chat on the youth board specifically. Janelle, are you still with us, or did you have to run
Yeah,
to
no problem.
class? Oh, that's great.
No, thank you. Hi, John. And yes, I saw a question from James earlier, but I'm the current steering or committee chair for the youth board. The youth board currently is a group of young professionals, 18 to 35 is the youth category here, but it's really for us to sit together once every few months and really talk about our experiences being youth, being involved in biosphere reserves, similar to conversations like Manar and Emma is talking about internships, how our internships have helped biosphere reserves move forward, but really just have those conversations that have not been had in the NPS spaces, really focusing on the importance of having the youth, having the youth perspective, especially in making decisions for the future. We are going to be kind of taking in this world, right? And so it's important that the decisions are made including us as well. So nothing without us, or nothing about us without us, is kind of the quote that we like to quip on. But it's great for professional development. We have presenters within the USBN, but also within Canada that are able to talk about grant writing, talk about creating a summit, which is something that's been a focus for us for the next couple of years. We'll put my email in the chat in case people are interested in getting some more information about what it looks like to be involved with the youth board, and any other questions in case this little blurb wasn't sufficient. But thank you.
Thanks, Janelle, for jumping in. I wanted to make sure we introduced you too as a part of this important sort of ecosystem of development work, thought, insight. That's great. There's a question here from James on the chat. How do you get residents of BR interested and engaged in questions of biodiversity and habitat?
That's a good one. And I think in my, I don't know, like especially working in northern Michigan, I really got the people that I did meet, I just really felt how important the landscape was to their lives. Like there are a lot of people who are really big hunters and just people, I mean, they're Great Lakes people, so they love their lakes and they already kind of have this inherent value for the landscape that they live in, and the land that they live on. So I think with the residents of OBR, it wasn't that hard, I guess, to get them to love the place that they live. But maybe a harder engagement is kind of talking about climate change and planning for the future, because we have a lot of different communities up there, and we also have a lot of people who maybe aren't on that page yet. So I think that would be more of a challenge. But in a kind of community, when we presented, me and Adam Schubel, who's on the steering committee, we presented to an Indian River Beach Club, and they were talking about how they have some kind of memorial service where whenever someone in their beach club passes away, they plant a tree. So they were kind of asking me if I had any suggestions for what kind of trees they should plant. And I was talking to them, you know, it's always good to have native trees to OBR, like white pine and red pine. And that had never occurred to them. So they're kind of like, you know what, that's a really, really great suggestion. And we're going to take that and kind of start valuing that native trees in this kind of memorial service they do. So that was a really fun kind of I mean, obviously not fun because it's on the topic of someone passing away, but it was a really meaningful way to kind of like influence that kind of connection to land a little bit.
I see a great question from Jessica, and maybe I can contextualize a little more broadly. Emma, this was principally to you, but I think as a broad question. She says, perhaps outside the presentation focus, I'm curious how it was to work with a biosphere with a huge military presence that Emma mentioned. I would imagine a lot of conflicting interests and priorities. And maybe we can contextualize it to say, in a number of biospheres, there can be a very large, whether it's a park, in this case it's a military base, or some other sort of large entity, right? And in the Adirondacks, the state forest system, right, or state park system. So when there's a sort of a dominant player within the landscape that's clearly part of the important part of that landscape, how do you see that start to play out?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think in Mojave and Colorado deserts, it was a lot of like the dynamic was the military presence is really, really hesitant to engage with anything that looks like it could be additional regulation, or that participating in it would restrict their training, restrict what they're able to do at all. So one, just emphasizing that this is a non-regulatory thing and that it's totally voluntary. And it doesn't come with any like training restrictions or anything like that. It was really, really important. And then I think at least the people I worked with were honestly pretty willing to collaborate. And I think that there's a lot of areas where the interests of like conservation and the interests of at least local like sustainable development and the interests of the military base really do align. Things like there's this guy whose whole job is encroachment manager, and I think most bases will have these. They basically want to avoid anything that would restrict their training abilities, and so things like they're also beholden to the Endangered Species Act. So the more that they can do to help desert tortoises, the less that they have to derail their training to avoid where tortoises live on their bases, things like that. And they're also just have so much land that they have like dedicated natural resource managers, et cetera. So there's a lot of places where they're aligned, or like Death Valley National Park has a bunch of bordering lands with Fort Irwin and the China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station. And so just like having common messaging between the Park Service and Bureau of Land Management lands and military bases, obviously, or like around OHV use, where you're allowed to go, around visitors to national parks, especially to keep them away from those areas. There's a lot of areas where the interests are aligned, but it's a matter of like framing it as a collaboration and not a regulatory thing, and like getting in the door that way.
Thank you. I love this next question. There's actually a number of dimensions to it. Based on your experiences, do you think there's going to be a problem luring youth or attracting youth to conservation work like the BRs moving forward because of the remote work, because of its sort of remote or nature? It says, I recently spoke with another excellent NPS intern who told me she is switching from conservation to nursing because she wants to work with people in just in a different way, right? So how do you see sort of the nature of this field developing relative to talent pool and attractiveness?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that also there is something about me and Emma's internships.
Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback from somebody. Is that me or is that everybody?
I think it might be.
I'm getting that as well.
Scott, I think if you could mute. Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that something from me and Emma's internships is that we could have both been fully remote. Like outside of some in-person presentations and things like that, the majority of our work was, based online. But what we were able to do in person, and Emma was able to be in Death Valley for the duration of her thing. So even though there are a lot of positions that could be remote, there shouldn't be, because that is kind of, even if you don't get to interact with people that much as a part of your position, like just being able to be in space and with coworkers or being in a, kind of that area, I think that is really crucial. So I think to kind of reframe this question, I think those conservation positions should be a hybrid at the very least, because, so much in this age now is like, makes people feel lonely, and this is kind of going to a different conversation, but just being able to have that connection and be be in what's called kind of nature, even though your job doesn't necessarily, like conservation work can happen a lot of the time online and on emails, but just kind of being in the space is just good for the soul and making people motivated to do the conservation work that they're doing instead of just like being in their apartment 24/7 and then just not really being able to see the land that they're working to protect and that kind of sense.
Yeah, and to just kind of add on to that, I think a lot of the I think that the remote jobs are something that's happening in a lot of sectors, not just conservation. But conservation is, especially when it comes to at least like national parks and stuff, is kind of interesting in that the ones that are in person that you can really like go after, and they're outside and they're working with a crew of people and they're in person. A lot of those ones that really can't be done remotely also like pay like nothing, which is obviously a much larger conversation. But I think that that also kind of that definitely creates a big barrier, and the pattern of like any that kind of are more on the fair paying side of things are the ones that are remote, kind of creates a situation. I think that that exacerbates a barrier that already exists and has existed for a long time.
I'll add a little context. So I'm very far from my internships. However, I think one of the, and especially coming through COVID and with the acceleration of all of our online tools and capacities, that I think to build successful internship programs, and I said I've been doing this for 30 or 40 years now, it really have to be attentive to sort of how do you create the community. It's not enough to hire an intern and have them go do their work and then get their work. You have to craft an experience by which the internship, the interns and the internship finds opportunities as much as possible to feel the experience and to live within the experience as much as possible. That doesn't mean we have all the resources to do everything we want. For instance, the fact that there were 7 or so interns, a little bit more than that when you add some of our Canadian partners, right? But trying to create a community, right? And then working with the youth board, or making sure that in our case we had a different team of students through a master's project working on OBR, and I think it was 4 or 5 of them, and they spent a couple of months at the biostation, right, in community with others, and you know, thanks to Newt and Adam and others for doing that. So it's really a part of curating their experience. It's not enough to say we need an intern to do X, Y, or Z, to build this widget, to build this model, to do this spreadsheet. It has to be as valuable experience to them professionally, and it has to fit within what they believe, right? Whether they want to be isolated or independent, or, you know, or in community. We've seen this happen, for instance, on the coast of Maine, where, you know, an internship or something like that in a small rural community works for a lot of people who love that. And it doesn't work at all for the people who don't want that, right? So finding the right fit and finding the right individuals that fit those circumstances, and then curating the experience. It makes the internship coordination a little bit harder, but to be honest with you, it makes it a lot more meaningful for both the organization and hopefully for the participants themselves. I see, Cliff, your hand jumped up. I'm glad to hear from you.
Thanks, John. And you can obviously tell everyone on this webinar just how skilled, talent, and mature beyond their years these Emma and Minar are. And I think that there's what they brought to the Biosphere Regions in a very, I know, at least from Emma's internship at Death Valley, were very challenging circumstances. Like we kind of warned Emma before she got there about some of it, but that's nothing compared to when you land and you're working in a remote park and your direct supervisor is 50 miles away. And I'm talking to Emma on this format, right? That each, I think logistically, each biosphere region presents unique challenges because of because they are all so different in their organization. And Emma talked about her, the nature of the landscape and the partners, and she mentioned the military. That biosphere region, I couldn't imagine a more challenging one for just the size, the stage of relative dormancy, like she mentioned, where we had a core group of park staff that had been meeting leading up to her recruitment, but really it was Emma doing the outreach and being the spokesperson and the advocate and going to the meetings and figuring it out and providing the follow-up, like she said, hectoring people on email, and the glue and the real reason why the biosphere region was able to activate. I can't stress more she is largely the reason. We contributed, but without Emma there, I don't think it would have happened. And I want to tell you, Emma, that the meeting yesterday was phenomenal, and we had even more partners at the table.
Oh, awesome.
And incredible energy and excitement about getting involved and positive feedback on it. So yeah, I just want to restate in my own words, as someone who has been recruiting interns. Emma was probably my 10th. Just how valuable your input is, Emma and Minar. I'm going to really take this to heart. And I'd like to follow up with you both to talk about your feedback and how we can do things in a better way.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Cliff. I'm glad to hear the meeting went well. And yeah, I do want to restate also that I don't think any of this would have been possible. Like the workshop that we had in November in Mojave and Colorado Deserts, anything leading up to that would have been possible without Cliff's support from the Washington office. And I'm sure I took up 75% of his time for a month there, but hope it was worth it.
Every minute, it's like John says, it's probably the favorite part of my job. So
yes, and we would love to follow up and kind of continue this conversation. James posed something in the chat that I think is interesting. So he said, I've been chatting with USNP and USBN people for a couple years on agricultural biodiversity. They were developing a program based on cores of BRs. Is this an idea in people's minds in the biosphere regions? It could engage park staff, national scientists, indigenous people, and communities. So, what was I gonna say?
Yeah, I think that idea clearly is still very much alive. I think there's some organizing around sort of this agricultural biodiversity piece. I think currently we don't have a ton of specific tasks under that, and there's currently no grant activity that I know of.
Oh,
However,
well, actually, it just occurred to me, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Shane Lishawa's team, with Loyola University Chicago is working with the Sault Ste. Marie tribe to preserve genetic diversity in their native wild rice monomen. So I think that is a pretty big project that's important to the tribes and, the biodiversity of Obtawaing that has been kind of moving forward and just a really great collaboration between the university, the biosphere, and the tribes. So I just wanted to pose that example.
No, it's a good example. It's a good example. One thing I wanted to mention while I'm waiting for a couple of people are having to sign off here at some point in time, but one of the things I did want to mention, and I know one of our new students is on the call. I'm not going to put him on the spot too much, but through the support of the Park Service to some degree, we've been able to put together a master's team, so of 7 individuals that will be working with the U.S. Biosphere Network on a number of activities in and around periodic reviews and network capacity. So the idea that we're going to continue to grow and utilize talent, the kinds of talent that you see here, and is going to continue to be an important part of the U.S. Biosphere Network at the network level. And again, we're encouraging you all as individual biospheres to work with and find partners and look at opportunities and build grant capacity to support intern and intern networks across your biospheres, whether that's through a park office or through the federal government internship or through a private internship. I mean, they can take all forms, right? We've as we've heard, there's any number of things that an intern can take on. They can't take on everything, although in some cases, Emma and Minar took on a lot, probably more than we told you we are going to. but that's part of the process, right? So Jessica, I'm just Jessica is
yeah,
asking if yeah.
Oh, sorry. I might have misinterpreted one of the questions in the chat. But I love that you brought up that example, Manar, of the Manuman. I think that's definitely a space that has been, I think it could align really well with the biosphere regions. I thought the question was asking if like a similar type of concept would be completely developed and focusing on agriculture. So like kind of outside of like the biosphere regions. And so I was like, oh, well, that might be kind of complicated and difficult to do, but I definitely think that it's a space that could use more outside perspectives and diverse perspectives when we talk about local food systems and, you know, working with the people on the ground here and the people who have been here and kind of incorporating those traditions. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that.
No, thank you, Jessica. I'll take the moment to say that one of the few sort of biomes, one of the few sort of ecological regions across the United States that we do not have represented within the Biosphere Network is a kind of a major grassland system. I'm not specifically saying that is only agriculture, but I would argue that in many cases, because of the dominance of agriculture, that grassland systems, tall grass, short grass, are pretty critical systems. We currently do not have a biosphere attributable to a large grassland system. And it's something that we've really thought a lot about. We'd love to see, we're trying to see where that could happen and how that might happen. So if any of you have ideas around that, that's certainly a place where that agriculture conversation would happen, certainly within that specific biosphere, but I think it's pertinent to many of the other biospheres because agriculture is an important part of that sustainable landscape, right? Especially as we start to head into both carbon and regenerative ag and some other activities in and around the biosphere networks. So I think there's a lot we could do in that space. It's just not one that we've tackled in my short tenure here so far. Any other questions? We're at 1:05. We were going to hold you until about 1:15 or so, just to make sure there was plenty of time for questions. I know a few people had to drop off at the top of the hour, but feel free to either jump in or add something to the chat conversation. Oh, there's Emma's email. That's good. Thank you for that.
John, I'll hop in there. I just want to echo what people have been saying in the chat and what you and Cliff added. Emma and Minar, congratulations. And this was an impressive presentation and also extremely helpful in terms of our planning. I think that the feedback you provided was spot on. And I think, as we're formulating, as John just said, this internship for the 7 interns that are joining us now, this is extremely important. So thank you again. And I hope that you can share this PowerPoint with us because I would love to reference this in the future. So thank you again and amazing work. We really appreciate what you've done for the individual biospheres and also for USBN. So congratulations and thanks.
Yeah.
Thank
Jessica,
you so much,
your
Kelly.
hand popped up.
Yeah, I just want to
sorry,
also
Minar.
say thank you to Kelly for all of the help she did with organizing and advertising this webinar. And we really appreciate that. And we will share it with you. Jessica, what were you going to say?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to take up too much space on this webinar, but I was really curious about, the plan moving forward with maybe your specific role at the U of M Biosphere Station. If, you were, and perhaps I missed it, perhaps you talked about this, but if there's upcoming interns that might be joining, if your role might be to help, really cultivate what those job positions would look like, kind of shape that, and maybe like what, if it was kind of on the mind of this leadership staff to kind of like shape the internship program moving forward based on your experiences.
Yeah, so I think with my current employment as a coordinator, I've kind of taken on a little bit more responsibility now that I've kind of graduated from intern. But as far as I know, because all of these things are grant based and really can be ephemeral, I don't know if there is a specific plan for another intern in the future. If there is, I mean, a couple of my bosses are on this call now, so to them, like, I would love to be a part of shaping that kind of structure and even training anybody that kind of came on. But yeah, that is kind of the whole point of this this feedback and this thing, is that me and Emma are kind of urging biospheres and to prioritize, interns in their grant writing and their funding, and really creating space for youth in biospheres as a priority and as an asset, really. But yeah, I really appreciate your question, and don't worry at all about taking space. Like, we really want to hear from you.
Thank you. Excellent work. Great job to both of you and to everyone else involved, all the interns involved.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I mean, as always, we have pretty high aspirations, and we need to continue to build the financial capacity both at the individual BR level and within USBN. I would love to see an internship program broadly of 10 individuals that we could place around the country in different places. I know other organizations that have used that model. I think something we can aspire to, but in the it's also, though, as I mentioned before, sort of continue to be incumbent upon the individual biospheres to sort of really build that cadre, that capacity, that fertile ground for new talent, new ideas, energy, zeal, insight, thoughtfulness, and quite frankly, to push us, right? We have our years, decades or longer of experience, and sometimes we all need the insights of others to continue to see around corners that we can no longer see around. So with that, I really do deeply appreciate, getting to know Manar, getting to know Emma, and getting to know the other folks, and getting to know the supervisors in the other places too, right? That it's a network, and the power of us is in the power of our network together. I see Samantha on, and her leadership, and Adam's leadership here, and Emma, your team is I know really happy, pleased that you were there for them, and you really helped them grow something important. Any other last comments? I'm sort of lost track of. I think we're good. Oh, just a few things in chat came up, but I think we're kind of coming to the end of the presentation. But I'll leave anybody with any last thoughts.
Sure.
Sam, you were a supervisor, yeah.
Yeah, just to echo everyone else, sort of. We couldn't have done it without you, Manar. So thanks. Really great job, and sounds like you both had such a instrumental role in helping to move the goals of both Biosphere Regions forward. And really great presentation today, and appreciate all the thought you put into it and the constructive feedback as well. That's not always easy to present to a group like this, and you did very good, nice job, and I appreciate it. And I think we'll take it to heart, and I think it's, yeah, as other people have said, it's energizing and inspiring to hear from you both. And as far as some of these questions you have on the screen, I think they're really good ones. I think we do need to, I think they do fit into the mission, and like to prioritize them. I have no doubt we could come up with really great project lists, all throughout that spectrum. But as far as for Obtawaing, still figuring out the how of that is the challenge we're having. But You know, I think the work in the past year has really moved us forward. So yeah, great work.
Yes, thank you very much. Samantha has been my rock since the beginning of this internship, and she has been such a huge support. And week after week, we've worked really closely together, and I've really enjoyed your mentorship and that guidance. So thank you very much.
You make it easy, Manar. She takes things and runs with it. I definitely one of those self-starters. So
I'll close with two quick things. One is I'd really thank you both, and thank you certainly on behalf of your colleagues, and I appreciate you, recognizing their work too. This is a network of networks, and the internship experience across the network is another aspect of that important piece. And then I'll say to our Biosphere partners, you've heard me say it, OBR heard me say it more than once, right? The work of the Biosphere is the work of the partners. And to the extent that our partners also have intern networks, that making sure that as we engage talent, students, and others, that we're creating sort of that the fluidity. So I know that Manar, for instance, I see Pam Grasmick on the screen, and I know Manar got to go to Beaver Island. I think I'm right there. So, or
I
did
was
you
not
not?
able to go, but I
You
did
didn't
make a
get to go.
presentation for
There you
the
go.
event.
Yeah. So we try to keep growing the network of capacity. I look at Pam because
Yeah.
we send a lot of students over to Beaver Island, and she's always graciously over there waiting for them by the plane. So thank you for that, Pam. But it really is about creating a fluidity and creating a network and creating, I use the word Rolodex. That's your address book, whatever, contacts. But it really is something that will serve you and your colleagues for the rest of your careers here. So thank you again. I appreciate you spending time with us today and really giving us the insights and thoughts and really the drive to keep pushing hard. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, John, and thank you to everyone for attending our what's called webinar. We really appreciate having a platform to talk about, what we've done and what ideas we have for the future. So for all of you who've stuck it out this long, we really appreciate it. We really value your presence and your comments and everything. So thank you very
thanks,
much.
everyone.
All right, I will stop share. And I wish you all a very good day and rest of your week.
Bye all. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye.
thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.